In a so-called free state, officials and stakeholders concoct solutions to problems often created by other bureaucrats and with little regard for infringements on the people. These stories are born at the apex of freedom and entrepreneurship. We foolishly advocate for the taxpayer. Brian's Beat presents Freedom Fools.
Hour 2 of Freedom Fools on WBSM. Nice day. Just take the radio, remember that? The walkie-talkie? The little Walkman kind of thing? I guess now I could just say, listen to us on the app, the WBSM app. Hour 2 of Freedom Fools, 508-996-0500 is how you get through the Brian's Beat quote of the day. It's only a small journey to a new direction, from Jim Rohn. It's only a small journey to a new direction. I guess I saved that for today because, well, small journey would be, instead of being on from 7 to 9, I'm now on from 1 to 4 on Saturday. That's a small journey. It's a big leap, though. It's a new direction. New direction for the show because it's not Brian's Beat, it's Freedom Fools. And by the way, Brian's Beat will be the Monday through Friday show beginning Monday. I listened to ABC News. I did not hear one thing. And you might say, well, that's an old story now. The story about the executive order. Okay, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Just for you know what and giggles. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. But did you hear what ABC News is talking about? And I would say, maybe if this were 20, 30, 40 years ago, it might mean something. But it really doesn't have that weight behind it today as it may have had way back when. I'm still getting over the fact that President Trump wants to and has named the Gulf of Mexico, which I still call it the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America. I guess if he wants to call it that, he can. I don't know what the next president will do, if there is a next president. I mean, this guy might stay in for another 4 years afterwards. But then he wanted to change the name of Veterans Day. Now, Veterans Day is a federal holiday. It is significant in that it marks the truce signing, ending World War I, 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. But the president, again, I'm not in his head, don't want to be in his head. Victory Day for World War I. Instead of Veterans Day. Yes, we won, and so did many other nations. Veterans Day stands for not only the veterans of World War I that may still be alive, I don't know how many are, but it also stands for today's veterans. Now, I'm not big on the holidays. I have stated it many times. We could combine Veterans Day and Memorial Day and have a Veterans Memorial Day. That would be fine by me. But if you are a U.S. veteran, you like the distinction of your Veterans Day. Why would you want it changed? Why would you want your Veterans Day to now be known as Victory Day for World War I? What about the other veterans, those that are still around from World War II, those that are still around from Korea, those that are still around from Vietnam, those that are still around from the first Gulf War, and then Afghanistan? What about all of these? And I don't mean to leave out any other veteran who served maybe during peacetime. When you change it to, look, and originally Veterans Day was about the victory of World War I. It really was. But now it's got that title, Veterans Day, and it's all my life there's been a Veterans Day, and it's always been November 11th. So what do you think is in the president's head about wanting to change the name? Victory Day for World War I instead of Veterans Day. If there's any veteran listening to me today, I'm curious as to what's going through your head. You served this country. Thank you. What should make you think? Do you think the president's going down the right road, changing it or wanting to change it back? He's backed off. I guess the veterans groups have actually come out and said, no, get a life. Victory Day for World War I. Are we going to have Victory Day for World War II instead of what? We don't really have a... They used to have VJ Day. I think they still celebrate that one in Rhode Island. I don't know how many states celebrate VJ or VE Day. They were big back in the late 40s through the 50s. I am hard-pressed to think of any VJ or VE Day celebrations here in the Commonwealth. Maybe there are. I just don't know. I might be just getting away from the fact that I can't help but think, why is it necessary to change Veterans Day? Now, it'd be one thing if you said, let's get rid of Veterans Day. But changing the name, and I'm not saying let's dump Veterans Day. I'm just saying, if he said, okay, we're dropping this holiday, or, if he said we're combining it with Memorial Day, that kind of makes sense. You're not getting rid of the veterans part of it. And Memorial Day, if I recall correctly, supposed to be on May 30th, celebrating the end of the Civil War, the War of the States. I don't know. Kind of gets me. 508-996-0500. And then earlier during the week, and maybe it was because of this particular announcement, although it happened a couple of days after the fact, President Trump says he's going to revoke Harvard University's tax-exempt status. And, I scratch my bald head. You sit there and you wonder why. Exactly what has Harvard done? What charge did the Internal Revenue Service put onto Harvard that said, you're not following the tax code? I don't know of any. And so the president comes out and makes this pronouncement. It has to make me think that he is going through one of these fits. They're not doing what I want them to do. So, okay, it's kind of like the tariffs. China decided to retaliate with tariffs, so we're going to double down on the tariffs that we gave them. Is this any way to really operate? Now, it's only my guess, but when this gets into court, because Harvard will take it that far, when this gets into court, whatever judge is going to, laugh it right out of the court and say, the government has no basis for this charge. Imagine the government attorney trying to state its case, the government's case against Harvard and removing its tax-exempt status. What are you going to say? You're going to say, well, they weren't fighting anti-Semitism well enough? They didn't stop the protesting on campus well enough? They allowed too many folks on the other side of the Gaza war, the Palestinians, to be on campus? Is that what you're going to say? What are you going to say that the federal government should remove the tax-exempt status of Harvard University? And it's gotten to the point, it's not a lot of money, but you've got tenured faculty at Harvard saying, we'll give up 10% of our salary for at least a year to fight the federal government in this particular case. There's a lot of backlash going on because the president doesn't like the way Harvard is fighting anti-Semitism. And we see this not only with Harvard. He did the same thing with Columbia, withholding $400 million from Columbia. And then after Columbia concedes, the Trump administration wants even more demands. So I know there are lots of people that, like President Trump, voted for President Trump, think he's doing an excellent job. But when you were casting your ballot on November 5, were you at all thinking that, well, somewhere down the road, our president is going to be taking Harvard to task here and trying to remove the tax-exempt status? Or whether you thought it would happen or not, maybe you think it's about time. A university like Harvard and all the Ivy League schools, in fact, why not also the state colleges and universities? Why should they have a tax-exempt status? Welcome back to Freedom Fools. Speaking of fools, we know about the story of a local college student. When I say a local college student, he went to UMass Boston. I don't know if that he'll ever be allowed back at UMass Boston. He went home for spring break. And apparently while he was home for spring break, he decided he was going to get himself into a little bit of trouble. He's alleged to have gone out and torched a Tesla. 19-year-old Owen McIntyre. He's facing federal charges. And these Teslas were the Cybertruck type. One caught fire and then the fire spread to another one. So technically, two of them. Well, his attorney has done something that really just kind of doesn't irk me. It just, if you haven't heard this, I got to tell you, I do reserve my right to laugh. All right. So the attorney is arguing in front of a judge as far as, bail hearing and stuff like that. He goes, Owen McIntyre is an adolescent first-year college student with no criminal history. Now, when I hear adolescent first-year college student, I'm thinking, this kid is like a whiz kid, 14 years old, something like that. He's already in college. Okay. This kid, Owen McIntyre, also has deep ties to his local community and a stable, supportive home environment waiting for him. He was at home when he allegedly torched the Tesla. The attorney went on to tell the judge, Owen McIntyre has well-documented medical and mental health needs. Yeah, I guess so. If he's out there torching a car, there might be something going on upstairs, including autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, depression, and the kicker, gender dysphoria that require ongoing care and structure, which can only be provided in the community. Well, I guess the judge heard that and said, well, I mean, this kid's got all this. How could we possibly keep him behind bars? And again, I reserve my right to laugh. Some of it probably isn't funny, but my warped sense of humor says, yeah, it is kind of funny. Imagine this guy behind bars and whomever is bringing his medication to him, and his jail cell jail cell mate says, what are all those drugs for? Well, I got depression. I've got ADHD. I've got autism. And at the same time, I'm trying to change my gender, trying to change my sex. Wow. So anyway, this kid is at home, not allowed to go out of the house, and he was told by the judge, stay away from Tesla dealerships. Again, I don't know if somebody commits arson, vandalism, if they are allowed out. I mean, in other words, do they get bail normally? If they do, well, then I guess there really isn't anything different here, except for the guy who cares if he's trying to change his sex, gender, whatever you want to call it. Why does that even come up with the ADHD, the depression, the autism? Seems to me those three might be enough to get him out on some type of bail. But then you throw in gender dysphoria, and is that supposed to be the kicker? Wow. I got to tell you, if it is, do you know how many other people who might go out and torch a Tesla or two or three might turn around and say, oh, I'm trying to change my gender? 508-996-0500. Hello.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
The Gulf of America,
Yes.
49% of it is bordered by Mexico. 46% is bordered by the United States. But
Okay.
I believe it should be called the Gulf of America because almost 90% of it is patrolled by the United States Coast Guard. So if your boat starts to sink, are you most likely to be rescued by the Mexican Coast Guard or the United States Coast Guard?
It depends on where I am.
In most of the Gulf of America, you would be saved by the United States Coast Guard.
Like I said,
So
it
that's
depends
why
on where.
we call it the Gulf of America.
If I'm along the coast of Mexico, some of those cities, I might be saved by the Mexican Coast Guard. I don't know. At any rate, if he wants to, if you want to call it the Gulf of America, have at it. You know.
Okay. The other issue is Harvard University doesn't even pay property taxes. So if one of their buildings caught on fire, does the Cambridge Fire Department come and put their fire out? If they do, then they should be paying some property taxes up in Cambridge. They're very wealthy. They have a $53.2 billion endowment. They can afford to pay some taxes. They pay nothing, and I'm absolutely against that. Everybody's got to have skin in the game, including churches and everything. Maybe a reduced tax, but everybody should repay taxes.
So I think Harvard does pay taxes on buildings that they generate income on. So in other words, their apartments that they have out there, they have, because that's rental income. They do pay taxes on those. As far as their school buildings, they get the requisite write-off like all the others. Now, I'm not going to disagree with you that maybe they should, but all schools would qualify. In this particular case, you've got a president who's going after one school.
Well, I think they should go after all schools and make it equal. I'm good for that, especially schools that are as wealthy. Everyone complains, oh, the rich doesn't pay their fair share. Well, Harvard University, they're sitting, did you hear me? $53.2
Oh, I know it. I know it well.
Good. And with that, Brian, I'll let you go.
All right.
See you later.
I do appreciate the call. Yeah, look, if you want to talk about changing the laws as far as that goes for nonprofits, that's where Congress comes in. Congress can change the laws, but Congress is too busy sitting on their hands right now. This is not something that the President of the United States, just on a whim, because Harvard decided to rebuff his order, to then turn around and say, okay, well, we're going to go after their tax-exempt status. That's blatantly, I know it's unconstitutional. I don't know if I want to step on the landmine and say it's illegal. But again, we'll see what happens if and when this ever gets to court. Remember, it was a couple of months ago, and maybe I guess we're getting into that 3-month territory now, when the president was screaming out at his lungs at the Maine governor. Remember that repartee that was going on at the White House?
Is the Maine here, the governor of Maine?
Not here.
Are you not going to comply with it?
I'm complying with state and federal laws.
We are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it, because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there, your population doesn't want men playing in women's sports. So you better comply, because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding.
See you in court.
Every state, good, I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one. And enjoy your life after governor, because I don't think you'll be in elected politics.
That should be a real easy one. That's what the president said. And then I don't remember if it was Thursday or Friday, the Trump administration said, oops, we can't do this. And they halted all action against the state of Maine. So, he just talks off the top of his head, and then he has his people, try to figure out, how do we make this work? It's like the old ready, shoot, aim. And then he has to walk it back. But did you hear him walk it back? No. Somebody else within the administration has to do that dirty work. So I say this dealing with Harvard. I understand the $53+ billion endowment. I'm not saying that they shouldn't pay any taxes, but whatever happens to Harvard has to happen to Yale, has to happen to UMass Dartmouth, has to happen to Bristol Community College, has to happen to the little private school up the street. What's that? Friends Academy and Tabor Academy. You can't just pick on one school because they rebuffed you. They said, "Bring it on, Mr. President. We're ready to take you on." Just like the governor of Maine. Hey, the governor of Maine knew what the law. She's an attorney general. And you know what? Worst case scenario with someone like Janet Mills, they're playing with house money. Win or lose, it's the taxpayers' money. Was it federal tax dollars or is it going to be state tax dollars? Not coming out of her pocket. So there you have it. This is what I see going on back and forth. The President of the United States, he has so many executive orders, and they're not all being challenged, but a overwhelming plethora of them are being challenged. And so this takes up time in court. And even when the president loses, he tries to sneak out some type of victory, or he goes against what the courts are ruling. Let's take this Rumesa Ozturk. She's the tough student who got apprehended by federal. I say federal because you don't know sometimes if they're ICE or Homeland Security or Border Patrol. So federal agents. They were masked. She didn't know exactly what to think. They apprehended her. They took her up to Vermont and they shipped her down to Louisiana. Well, the courts have ordered her to be taken back to Vermont. And instead of sending her back, the Trump administration, no, we're gonna keep on fighting this. What are they fighting? What are they fighting? I mean, they never come out and say exactly what this woman did. And from what researchers have been able to find out, and I use researchers as in reporters, toughs, worst thing that she may have done was write an op-ed piece for her school paper. That's why we're keeping somebody in custody? Really? We're keeping somebody in custody because she wrote an op-ed and you want to fight the extradition back up to the Vermont courts over that? Which again is tying up the court system. For what? Now you may agree that this woman should be deported. Well, you're not getting there any sooner by having this administration keep her down in Louisiana. They're going to fight a battle that probably ends up eventually sending her up to Vermont. And if not, if you keep her where she is, at least give her her day in court. We're not talking about a hardened criminal here. Or there's nothing in the paperwork to show that she is. So if you thought I was a little apprehensive before about this executive order that I brought up during hour number one, I guess you can see why. We've got an administration here, presidential administration, who is cracking down, to say the least. Excuse me. I want a safe community as much as the next person. I believe Mayor Mitchell would tell you that New Bedford is a safe community. Now, there could be reasonable debate about what is and what is not safe, but I'm not sure that anybody would say that the city of New Bedford is in need of having the military supplement New Bedford police. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you do think it's necessary. The Attorney General shall take all appropriate action to create a mechanism to provide legal resources and indemnification. That means if a military person or if a police officer or if ICE, any of those people who unjustly incur expenses and liabilities for actions taken during the performance of their official duties to enforce the law. What would have happened to Derek Chauvin? He was enforcing the law. What happens in cases of police brutality? And by the way, somehow, some way, you got to figure your tax dollars are going to get involved here, because even this part is a little sketchy. This mechanism shall include the use of private sector pro bono assistance for such law enforcement officers. There's more, as the saying goes, empowering state and local law enforcement. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and other appropriate heads of executive departments and agencies shall take all appropriate action to maximize the use of federal resources. 2, 1, provide new best practices to states and local law enforcement to aggressively police communities against all crimes. Is that what you're asking for? Are you asking the federal government to basically come in and tell you how to police your city, how to police your town? This is in the executive order. This is not me just speaking off the top of my head. 2, expand access and improve the quality of training available to state and local law enforcement. It begs the question, what does the military really know about regular policing? Military law is different than civilian law. 3, increase pay and benefits for law enforcement officers. So our federal tax dollars are not going to pay for this. 4, strengthen and expand legal protections for law enforcement officers. Now, I bet the police officers like that. What does it do to the, you are innocent until proven guilty. And if you are increasing pay and benefits, expanding legal protections, expanding what? Are you saying that police officers are going to be allowed to do a little bit more than what they're allowed to do right now? Like what? Again, this is up to the Attorney General and other appropriate heads of executive departments and agencies. 5, seek enhanced sentences for crimes against law enforcement officers. We can dilly and we can dally about this, and I mean no disrespect to any law enforcement officer. You're out there, crap happens. But if you get hit by a suspect and you're bleeding from the ear, That's a crime in and of itself. That should not be enhanced because you are an officer of the law. The crime is the crime. Let's not make it something else. Let's not federalize it. The crime is the crime. Promote investment in the security and capacity of prisons. Number 7, increase the investment in and collection, distribution, and uniformity of crime data across jurisdictions. Doesn't the FBI already do that? Within 60 days of the date of this order, the Attorney General shall review all ongoing federal consent decrees, out-of-court agreements, and post-judgment orders to which a state or local law enforcement agency is a party and modify, rescind, or move to conclude such measures that unduly impede the performance of law enforcement functions. Really? So basically, this order is saying we're going to make it open season. Open season. Law enforcement can do pretty much whatever. If you've got some type of consent decree against them, well, we'll just modify it. It's not going to be that bad anymore. If you drag somebody, a police officer, out of their car, and you take your billy club and you start wailing away on them, and somebody presses a lawsuit because of the punishment that police gave them, what we would call police brutality, you're going to have the Attorney General review all of this and maybe change what's happened. Now, this is the way I'm reading it, and it is in black and white. It is the language. I'm not making this up. I printed it right off the government's website, the federal government's website. Section 4, using national security assets for law and order. Within 90 days of the date of this order, the order is dated April 28. So on or around, let's see, May, June, around July 28. The Attorney General and the Secretary of Defense, in consultation with the Secretary of Homeland Security and the heads of agencies as appropriate, shall increase the provision of excess military and national security assets in local jurisdictions to assist state and local law enforcement. If you're serving in the military right now, how is that hitting you? Can you imagine yourself being used to crime fight in a city or town? Maybe it's your home state, maybe it's your hometown. Within 90 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of Defense, in coordination with the Attorney General, shall determine how military and national security assets, training, non-lethal capabilities, and personnel can most effectively be utilized to prevent crime. Sounds like our military is going to be involved in the day-to-day operation of policing in our cities and towns. Now, I thought that there was some law, trying to be nice about this, some law that says, no, you can't do that. But apparently, with an executive order, you can change that. And we can question the President of the United States all we want. He signed. It's like you signed on the dotted line for this medical procedure, or you signed on the dotted line, you got to pay this bill. He signed it. He signed the executive order. You and I didn't see it, but he signed it. And to the attorneys that are working in the Trump administration who should know constitutional law, shame on them. They should know better. But they did it anyway. Section 5, holding state and local officials accountable. This is where the mayor and city councilors, board of selectmen, this is where you might want to think about it. The Attorney General, Pam Blondie, shall, not will, shall pursue all necessary legal remedies and enforce measures to enforce the rights of Americans impacted by crime, and shall prioritize prosecution of any applicable violations of federal crime law with respect to state and local jurisdictions whose officials, A, willfully and unlawfully direct the obstruction of criminal law, including by directly and unlawfully prohibiting law enforcement officers from carrying out duties necessary for public safety and law enforcement. Sounds like the case up in was it Wisconsin, where the judge let the attorney and the suspect defendant in her courtroom out a side door. I think we're going to find out more about that particular case, but this would be a classic example of what the directive is talking about. And there's a B, or unlawfully engage in discrimination or civil rights violations under the guise of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that restrict law enforcement activity or endanger citizens. So this is the teeth behind making sure that DEI is indeed followed through on. Now, I am of the opinion, and I'm sure there'll be people that disagree with me, but I am of the opinion that if a community wants to keep DEI, if a private employer wants to keep DEI, and they're willing to pay the bounty or whatever it's going to cost for their DEI, that they should be allowed to go ahead with it. I don't have to live there. I don't have to work there. If they want to do it, they should be allowed to do it. It's like we're a commonwealth here in Massachusetts. There are other areas like the Republic of Texas, the state of another, state. So what this directive is saying is if there is some official, mayor, select board member, school committee, school superintendent, who is following through on diversity, equity, and inclusion because that's what they have written in their laws. That's what we have written here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And you try to enforce your law, well, that's a crime now against the federal government for trying to stop DEI. Now, I can understand if you're trying to stop the federal government because there's somebody really committing a crime. Maybe a gunman's running through. Maybe somebody is wanted for kidnapping. But you're unlawfully engaged in discrimination or civil rights violations under the guise of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I would say at best, there's going to be a court hearing for something like that. But in this particular case, you could be the one following your own state laws and end up going to court over it. I come back. For those that voted for Donald Trump, is this what you voted for? No idea if Abrego Garcia will ever come home, and the family awaits. I like to talk about freedom, and I think it is the framework of this country, what it was founded on, etc., etc. And we all need to do our part, or should want to do our part to spread that freedom. We spoke about the tariffs a while back, and I'm wondering how that's going to be hitting certain segments of our society. So during the Saturday show, I'm going to try every week to have somebody who represents a local piece of our economy come in and try to find out if tariffs or anything like that are affecting them, what folks can do on their own to maybe make things better. And after ABC tells us what they want us to know, we're going to be joined by Susan Murray. Besides being one of our local